At this time, I would also like to take the opportunity to introduce our speaker. I have been able to know him as a fellow pastor over the years, but over this last little while, I've discovered that he has 4 loves in his life. The first love is the Lord Jesus Christ, who has placed his hand in his life, given him a call, which became his second. Well, it's actually a continuation of the first love, because out of that love for Jesus Christ, he discovered a love for God's will in his life, hence his call to ministry, which continued on in his training in various ways to this point where he has a passion for evangelism, for the growth of our church in health and well-being, against anything that will be for the decline of the church. He's willing to stand up for that. He's willing to stand up against violence in the church, abuse and violence, whether in the church or in the community, and what the church can do about that. And we have so far appreciated his presentation last evening. And this evening, it's the church and the age of the digital age of the church, or how the church is affected in this area. I told you, Stephen, it's not easy to talk about this thing, isn't it? But I'm sure that it will be a blessing to you. Similarly, tomorrow evening, how postmodernism affects the church. What are we doing about that? I'm hoping that these are inspiring to us all as we go back. But that's his call, it's his passion, it's his love. The next love in his life, of course, is Rosalie. And together they have been blessed with 2 children, Nancy and Kevin. But there was a 4th love in his life, and this one gives me a sort of a connection with him. And I'm always looking for connection with folks. Now, I have a grandson, he's about 5 years old. And if you were to visit his home, in the basement of the home, there are all kinds of train sets all over the place. Now, I have learned that Stephen loves trains. And it reminds me of that spiritual that we sing, this train is a holy train. And you've got to get on board. I hope you have that kind of train. But it's good to know that you have something other than just this passion for ministry, something that relaxes you and gives you a sense of recreation. And that's a connection. I've always wanted that as a child. Lots of trains. Well, my grandson has it, so I can play with it. I don't have to own it. So it's good to know that Stephen has that side. Each of us have some of your sports or some other activities, skating, probably hockey. But we each have that side that wants to just relax and be entertained and be refreshed. This evening, he will come to speak with us. And I do trust that as we listen to Christian witness in a digital age, that God will minister to us. Before asking him to come for prayer, I want to read for you this passage that I was inspired to go back to. I read it a while ago, and as Stephen began to speak, it came to me again. It is from Isaiah 50, verses 4, 5, and 6. The Lord has given me the tongue of the learned. Some Bibles have of the disciple, or the one who has been taught, that I should know how to speak a word in season to him who is weary. He awakens me morning by morning. He awakens my ear to hear as the learned. The Lord God has opened my ear, and I was not rebellious, nor did I turn away. May the same God allow us to learn from Stephen, so we can speak a word to those who are in need in season. Would you come, please, Stephen? You welcome him, please. Let us pray. Eternal and gracious God, it is with joy and delight we come to you this evening, knowing that you are always ready to hear and answer our prayers. May your anointing rest in Stephen. The word that you have given unto him, open our hearts that we might hear it, and grant us the inspiration and the determination to put it into practice as we leave this place to move on in life beyond these lectures. May your Spirit be your guide in all things. So bless your servant and use him in a mighty way tonight. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. It's all yours.
There, hopefully the technology is all working as we talk about a digital age tonight. It's good to be here and good to be back to be able to talk about something that I have really been thinking a lot about. And I don't suggest that I'm going to give you all of the answers. I think part of what I want to do is to help us to think about some of the questions that we might ask, because we're in the midst of an ongoing change in society. We really are not at the end of whatever changes are going to take place because of digital technology. So hopefully tonight we'll at least be able to ask some questions that will help us to know the way forward. I well remember when Rosalie and I went to Radio Shack in 1989 to purchase a new top-of-the-line computer, a Tandy 1000. 640K of memory. What would we ever do with all of that? 2 floppy disk drives, MS-DOS, the monitor that was twice as thick as the screen was wide. And so for $2,828, that number still rings in my mind. Those were 1989 dollars. We entered the computer age. I knew little about the internet and had never received an email. I thought I was buying a fancy word processor. Like most people at the time, we had no idea how digital technology would affect our lives. Contemporary society is characterized by rapid and continuous change, and much of that change relates to ways that the still ongoing development of digital technology is affecting social life. What began as a change most noticeably in modes of communication and information access has developed into far more important changes. New ways of understanding the self, new ways of experiencing and understanding community, new ways of exercising power. Virtual experiences blend with physical experiences, while virtual places and spaces take on and perhaps sometimes eclipse the meaning previously ascribed to the physical world. Experiencing other people becomes complex in a world where I know people both virtually and bodily, and the two, or perhaps even more identities, do not always align. When I interact with someone's avatar, am I interacting with an actual person? How do I know the difference, if there is a difference? When I converse with someone on Facebook, how has my conversation changed from what it would be face-to-face? These are new questions that would have been meaningless 10 years ago, except perhaps in science fiction. Our relationships with others and our understanding of ourselves is changing. The church and its leaders are affected by these changes, but do we understand how we're affected and how the church's witness is affected? How does digital technology change people's experience and understanding of God? How does prayer change when you're part of an online prayer group, as people in focus groups have been talking to me about? How does corporate worship change when I'm a virtual member of an online church, or when I'm worshiping at a video venue of a multi-site congregation? What is the meaning of sacred space in a digital age? And how do all of these questions affect the church's witness? These issues are complicated by the fact that different generational cohorts experience digital technology in quite different ways, and hopefully you will see that a little later on as I show you some statistics from my own research. Many who are elderly may feel like they are looking in on a digital world from the outside. For some of them, the digital age may be destroying that which they've always considered sacred. Baby boomers like me attempt to incorporate digital technology in our lives and in our worship experience, but we do so as digital immigrants who maintain a strong analog accent. For young adults, so-called digital natives, my children, who've always lived in a digital age, it may be difficult to conceive of the world in any other way. How does a digital perspective affect the way they conceive of God and of the church and of the gospel? In the traditional sociological paradigm, technology and secularism have usually been linked, in part because of the link between technology and modernity. It was believed that the co-opting of technology by religious organizations for reasons of efficiency and effectiveness leads ultimately to the so-called iron cage. Though modern congregations may be more efficient by using technology, they lose their spiritual soul in the process. A congregation that has been reduced to technique has been secularized. Efficiency and rationality do not produce spiritual vitality. It's difficult to read Jacques Ellul or Neil Postman or some others and conclude that technology can enhance our worship unless it is the technology itself that we're beginning to worship. Ellul's wry comment, "It is unnecessary to evoke spiritual powers when machines give much better results," suggests that Christianity is destined to be the loser when technology invades the church. I believe there are some good reasons to question those assumptions in the digital age, because digital technology is quite unlike previous technologies. Rather than seeing the digital age as the culmination of technological development, which I think many people do, it would be wise to ask if society is witnessing something quite different from the invention of, say, the automobile or the television. If we're witnessing a technology that produces new questions and even new mysteries, and that produces community in new ways as well. Digital technology is not just old technology on steroids. It is not just about efficiency. It is a paradigm shift in our society. Dawson and Cowan write that as cyberspace increasingly becomes the center of religious social networks, it changes the very definition of what a congregation is. And so they expect that with expanded social horizons and involvements because of the internet, there's a good possibility that digital technology will bode well for faith. They say the internet could play a leading role in the adaptation of religion to the new social reality, but only if the religious seek to explore the possibilities creatively. There are a number of obvious ways that churches are affected by digital technology, and my research shows that few congregations are actually considering those issues. My candid comment would be that most church leaders seem to comprehend neither the extent of the social change caused by digital media, nor the ways in which digital technology impacts the church and its message. When I talk with some pastors about technology and Christian witness, they seem to think that I'm talking about whether they use PowerPoint slides in worship or whether they use email. I'm not saying that the projection of images and video during worship is not a major change for some churches, but it is not nearly as significant a change for the church as our social networking and information uploading and the always-on lives of their members and the virtual realities experienced in the gaming and online social worlds. The very people whom churches seek to reach with the gospel, especially youth and young adults, are living social lives that those who are older have never experienced. Let's think first of all about sacred place and space. The church building. A local congregation's physical worship space has for centuries been central to what it means to be a church. The internet provides new possibilities for congregations. Thanks to digital technology, 3 of the congregations that I surveyed are multi-site congregations. One rents space in a school. Another has a storefront location in a major shopping mall. The third has taken over a church building of a congregation that was preparing to close its doors. And so with no additional capital outlay, these congregations have expanded their worship space and are reaching new people in new communities by using relatively inexpensive video venues instead of constructing expensive new worship sites. In fact, some congregations are reevaluating the value of physical worship space Digital technology can turn any space into a spiritual space. I want us to think a bit about the arts. Congregations that link digital technology to the creative arts are exploring new possibilities for incorporating the arts and worship in ways that are new and innovative, in ways that had not been seen in the 20th century because they weren't possible without the technology. These congregations seek ways to provide new experiences of mystery and transcendence through uses of the arts. Their tech crews and graphic designers emphasized to me when I interviewed them that they are artists, not computer geeks. They seek to engage artists and congregations in the creation of sacred experiences using media in ways that were not previously possible. One focus group member put it this way: digital technology allows us to have a broader expression of the artistic aspects of faith, music, drama, painting, what have you. With this kind of technology, we're able to do that more and broader and better. Few church leaders, especially if they're my age or older, realize the potential for digital technology to be a new platform for the creative arts. They see it as a traditional technological tool without understanding the creative energy that it is unleashing in the social world. It's impossible to forecast where the digital world is taking us. Who could have foreseen 10 years ago what's happened today? But I'm convinced that digital technology will be less and less related to computer science and more related to the creative arts. That is already happening. That means that instead of relying on the techie people, churches need to invite artists to lead the way so that we can harness the potential of digital media to creatively communicate the gospel. What about community? Digital technology provides new experiences of community and incorporates people who previously were excluded from our churches. Elderly residents at a seniors complex can attend a live-streamed worship service from their church. They can go to church on Sunday morning in ways that they had previously been unable to do. When I attended one church, a young woman with severe environmental allergies took part in the worship service that morning via a video link. Hearing impaired seniors pick up wireless headsets at the door as they enter worship. Young adults at one church told me how meaningful it was for them to have several homebound seniors speak to the congregation in video clips. The pastor incorporated the clips with his sermon topics and called them weekly legacy moments. It gave the young adults a new appreciation for the age diversity and wisdom of their congregation. I was amazed at how many times students in focus groups told me that they watched the worship service of their home church online while they're away at university. Honestly, I never would have guessed it. And people talked about Facebook everywhere. They mentioned the usual problems, but mostly they told me about how close they had become with people in their congregation that they otherwise would not know as well. And so again, just for an example, this is a young man. He says, it used to be you'd only talk to certain people from a church on a Sunday morning, and maybe if you were of a certain age demographic. But now it's like you can go, there's more, it's much more connected, because there's Facebook and there's Twitter and there's other stuff. So it's definitely more connected. Obviously, I'm just beginning to analyze a mountain of data, but I am intrigued so far by ways in which digital technology at least seems not to be corrosive to faith and to community in ways that previous technologies have been. And I'm especially interested in ways that digital technology may even enhance the experience of community. Time after time, young adults emphasize that they would not even attend for the first time a church without a web page or a Facebook page. And that the internet is the new front door of the church. If we're going to get new people to come to our church, we need to have an awesome website. That's what younger people coming through, they're going to look at the website. They're going to look at profiles. They're going to look at times. They're looking at, does their statement match what my thought process goes? So I think that you can use technology in a positive way, especially if you're looking to the future and looking to continue to grow and reach new people out there. Same congregation. You kind of want your church to look good from the street when you walk by. You want to make sure it's at least clean and it's picked up a bit. It's like the internet is that second street. When people come by, they want to look at it and, oh, that looks like people care, and have kept it up to a certain extent. It's kind of like your secondary face of the church. I had people say, young adults say, if a church doesn't have a website, I wonder, what are they trying to hide? There's awareness that digital technology is changing everyday life and church life, but little understanding among many of what those changes mean and how either to respond to the changes or to be proactive in incorporating digital media in congregational life. We're living in the midst of a historic change in social life. Digital technology is shaping a new society to an extent not seen in centuries, I believe. The digital revolution has only begun. The extent to which some things have changed even since I began my research in the fall of 2011 is astounding. I want to talk a bit more about authenticity, too, in light of the digital age. Churches used to be able to say one thing to the church crowd while presenting something quite different to the community. The digital age makes that impossible. And it is seen as inauthentic because it is inauthentic. Lines excerpted from sermons are being tweeted as soon as they are spoken on Sunday mornings. Cell phones record worship services and upload them to the web. The pastor's story about some amazing circumstance is vetted on Snopes.com within seconds. We must have a clear message. The internet has had the very positive effect of making it much more difficult for churches to pretend to be something other than they are. To the extent that digital media such as Facebook and Twitter make a congregation more transparent and less finessed, I think the witness of the church in a secular age is enhanced. It helps the church's witness if our flaws are out in the open and we do not hide them. But if congregations or church leaders attempt to use digital media to portray themselves in ways that are inauthentic, or even if Snopes.com makes it clear to young adults that the pastor's sermon illustration or his supposed facts are untrustworthy or flat wrong, the church's witness can be destroyed. Uploading. In my research, several pastors expressed to me their concern about the effect of access to religious knowledge online. That the church no longer has the ability to filter what people hear and read like it did so many years ago when pastors could censor the books in the church library. Online and unlimited access to religious information is something new. And I'm sure it's had an effect on congregations. But quite honestly, I think overall it's a very good thing for people to learn more, not less. That access is not actually the main effect of online information. The main effect is that people themselves can upload religious content to the internet. Online, one person's opinion may carry equal weight with the world's great religions. It may be as simple as a young adult commenting on Facebook about the sermon that he just heard, expressing agreement or disagreement, or beginning an online discussion on the topic. It may be the pastor inviting members to respond to ideas that she has discussed in her blog. It could be a member uploading a sermon from another church or an article to a personal website. Few churches have considered the possibilities of inviting a wide range of people to express themselves online. We're worried about control. Who will control the content? How can comments by others be removed when they disturb us? And there may be legitimate reasons to have some control of the content. Limit profanity or slander, for example. But churches that will not allow online dialogue for fear that someone's comments will not follow the party line will find the digital age very frustrating. The digital age is about subverting control by the few over the many, just as surely as the printing press ended the monopoly of the clergy and the church hierarchy. Digital technology democratizes social life. That reality is very difficult for institutions and hierarchies. It isn't that young adults have no respect for social institutions. But to them, many institutions seem quaint and antiquated unless they have clear purpose. In the work world of many young adults, hierarchical organizations are giving way to teams and digital communities. It's a very recent and ongoing change, and something that I experienced in some of the churches that I visited. They're using digital technology and realizing they have to get rid of the hierarchy and work in teams. A change to a more team-based approach can be very good, but very difficult for congregations. I think it empowers the priesthood of all believers in new ways, but it requires much humility among older and experienced and gifted leaders. Members who have neither training nor ability in public speaking can now express themselves about their faith in ways not possible before. And digital technology brings change. The incorporation of digital technology in congregational life does entail considerable change. It may be as obvious as installing a giant screen in front of the organ pipes and hanging a projector from the ceiling. And certainly in my visits to churches, that was actually the number one issue that was brought up in terms of the most difficult aspect. I thought that was sort of sad in many ways, but that certainly was, for many churches, the most difficult issue. It may mean that most members receive their church information by email or on Facebook, while still mailing newsletters to a shrinking number of seniors. It may mean video clips during the offering or a debit machine in the foyer. Congregations and their leaders tend to respond to digital technology, I think, in one of three ways. Some churches say, it is a cool new tool to communicate the gospel and reach the young. Churches need to use it to show that we're modern and relevant. More is better. New is better. Flashy is better. Expensive is better. Let's buy all that stuff. Some churches say it subverts important values, meaningful relationships, quiet meditation. And the church needs to provide a refuge from those things. Less is better. Old is better. Traditional is better. Cheap is better. And some churches say, let's fight about these things. Hey, let's have a good fight. It's just about style and personal preference. You say what you want and I'll say what I want. We'll fight about it. Because what I want is what's better. And I really believe those three responses are all the same. It's the same response. They uncritically look at the use of digital technology in the life of the church and in the life of members. The focus is on style and personal preference. It is not on mission, it's not on community, it's not on witness. There's little consideration or comprehension of the effect of digital media on the church's witness. And none of those responses appreciate how community itself is changing, or how younger people are forming their sense of identity and their sense of being part of a networked community in quite new ways that involve the internet. Many church leaders see digital technology only as communication. They would talk about their email ministry as if it was this sort of cutting-edge new thing. Or as a budget expense, instead of seeing how social life, community, and identity are changing, whether the church embraces the changes or not. Many churches that use technology to be cool are not at all relevant to the young that they think they're going to attract. In fact, their intention to be cool demonstrates to young adults the extent to which they're not relevant. At the same time, churches that limit or exclude technology for spiritual reasons, we are more spiritual because we don't have a screen, are no better, and perhaps are worse, with regard to meaningful relationships and an understanding and an experience of God's presence. In my previous research about declining congregations, it was clear that there was no relationship between a lack of technology and better worship. In fact, I would say many times the opposite seemed true. And the reason, I think, was this. Churches that don't take the time and effort to understand digital technology don't take the time and effort to understand many things. I believe it's essential that we begin to think critically in our congregations as we think about digital technology. Although I observed some congregations that used a lot of digital technology in worship and some that used none at all, in most cases they both displayed a lack of critical thinking about what the effect of technology is, not only in worship, but in the everyday social lives of their members. Some congregations seem eager to use whatever technology is available, but with little thought about how it's affecting people, how it's affecting the faith community. Some congregations seem to have thought about some of the negative aspects of utilizing digital technology, especially during worship, but have not considered the extent to social life, that social life is changing among the young. Digital media are not tools like other technologies. They change aspects of who we understand ourselves to be and how we relate to others. In some ways that may be very good, and in some ways it may not be. In some ways that may be very good, in some ways it may not be good at all. Churches need to evaluate critically the uses and effects of digital technology in members' lives, in the life of the church, and in witness to our society, so we can understand how and why and when to include it or exclude it. Such critical thought about digital media brings with it a great opportunity. It isn't only churches who are not thinking critically about the digital world. Lots of people, lots of institutions in our society are not thinking critically about these things. And I believe here the church has an opportunity to lead in a digital age, to get ahead of the passive society around us and begin to harness digital technology for the kingdom. Not just by using PowerPoint slides and YouTube videos and email, but by thinking about the kind of church that we will be in this age. Christians can speak in relevant ways about how the internet affects relationships with one another and with God. But we waste that opportunity if we argue about digital technology without understanding how it is affecting lives and relationships. People in congregations understand this need, and they're looking to pastors for leadership. And I just found this quite remarkable. You know, when you think of what is the pastor's job description, do we have in the job description to be able to guide the congregation in understanding the effects of digital technology? Probably not. And yet, in my survey, I was amazed. So this is a scale of 1 to 10. I asked people the importance that the pastor is knowledgeable about digital technology, first of all. How important do people think it is that the pastor understands this stuff? On a scale of 1 to 10, the mean score was 7.85, pretty high. The most common score, the mode, was 10. Most people put 10. No age cohort scored less than 7. So from young to senior, people said the pastor needs to have a knowledge of digital technology. And then I asked, how important is it that the pastor can guide the congregation about the dangers of digital technology? The score goes up. 8.55, and again, no age cohort scored less than 8 as the mean. The mode, again, is 10. When I looked at it the other way and said, how many people scored 1, which means it's not at all important? How many people said it's not at all important that the pastor knows about this stuff? 2.2%, so 97.8% said it's important to some extent. How many said it's not at all important the pastors can guide regarding dangers? 98.9% think it's at least at some level important. That's a change. I think people in our churches are understanding. We need to understand this, and we're looking to our leadership to help us. There's great danger that digital technology will result in people being objectivized and commercialized. But there's also great potential that with guidance, people will learn how to build healthy relationships. I think this provides a powerful and relevant opportunity for churches. Churches can speak pastorally and prophetically about how to build healthy relationships online. But do we do that? I mean, youth and young adults in our churches are building relationships online. Do we give them any guidance? We can teach people to be less interested in the consumption of information about others, for example. and more interested in building loving relationships, even with those whom we know only online. It is human sin that turns people into objects. That's not the result of the internet. It's the result of our fallen nature. Sin is, as Grenz said, a failure of community. Churches can teach people to be salt and light while they are online, to be people who do not think of online others as objects, but as those to whom God has called us to go. The internet allows people to market themselves in ways that may be quite untrue, unhealthy, and unwise. We need to teach clearly that our identity is found in our relationship with God and developed through healthy relationships with others, not through solitary or virtual identity construction. In the internet world of trial identities, Christians can be genuine, especially online. That's an important aspect of witness in a digital age. Authenticity is the current buzzword precisely because the internet makes genuineness so important. I want to quickly look at two examples from my current research. Congregation number one is a replanted urban congregation. I'll just start out by saying I chose two congregations that are more than 1,000 miles from here, so you know no one in these congregations. Congregation one is a replanted urban congregation in the center of a major U.S. city. After shrinking to 12 members, quite a large building downtown, 12 members, they have now grown to about 60 people on Sunday morning, nearly all of whom are young adults and their children. To be quite honest, when I went to this church on Sunday morning, I was expecting to walk into a room full of seniors, and instead I saw 3 people older than I am. They promote themselves as a no-screen congregation. There is no screen anywhere in their building. Cell phones are not allowed. The only musical instrument was a piano. By removing digital technology from their sanctuary, the only electronic device was a single microphone. They provide a place of refuge and attract mostly people, hear this, they attract mostly people who work in the IT industry, or people whose social lives are inundated by screens, such as university faculty and grad students. They're a niche congregation. They realized that they had the world headquarters of one of the major U.S. airlines 2 blocks from their church. That there were a lot of IT people working there. And they said, nobody's reaching those people. We can't reach a lot of people, being the church we are, 12 people. But we might be able to reach those people if we make that our mission. And they are reaching people. Now, they're a niche congregation, I would say. They are effectively reaching those for whom a refuge from digital technology is spiritually meaningful. In an urban area of more than 2 million people, I doubt they're ever going to be a church of more than 100. But they are reaching people that no one else was reaching. And they are carrying out a clearly defined mission. Meanwhile, they have a professionally designed website that was one of the best I saw in my research. They connect with people digitally in a variety of ways outside of the Sunday service. The pastor articulated to me a clear understanding of why they had decided to do church as they do. It is based on a vision, not on an aversion to technology. Since they're mainly reaching IT workers, they're hardly opposed to technology. They have a mission. And they've decided how to use technology in light of that mission. And they've decided no screens is what will help us to carry out that mission and reach the people God has called us to reach. Congregation number 2. It's a 23-year-old church in a U.S. city of about 100,000, so size of St. John or Moncton. From their beginning in a living room in 1987, just a handful of people, they now have an average of 2,300 people in worship each weekend. They have intentionally embraced digital technology in what I can only say is over the top. Fog machines, light shows, $1.5 million in sound equipment, they told me. A control center under the platform. 3 of their 6 weekend services are video venues, not including the people who watch the service live by video on screens throughout their building. The services are streamed online. Lighting, sound, graphics, and video are carefully planned and executed in every service by their creative arts team. Notice it's not their tech crew, it's their creative arts team. Among all of the people that I interviewed, there was evidence of much critical thought about the use of digital technology. I interviewed 9 staff members and I had 2 focus groups. I was amazed both by the theological depth and by their critical thinking about how technology could not push the mission, but that the mission of the church had to push technology. They knew that trying to be cool will not work, especially with young adults. The pastor talked knowledgeably with critical insight about theoretical writings. Marshall McMullin he started talking about. Pastors and focus group members discussed the place of the arts in worship and the ways in which the arts use technology creatively in today's world. They reflect weekly in a creative team about whether the technology is accomplishing their goals. They are not driven by digital technology. They kept emphasizing that to me. They are driven by their clearly articulated vision to reach 10% of the unchurched people living in their county. A county they estimated had 80,000 unchurched people. They said, we want to reach 10% of those unchurched people. That was their mission, and they were using technology to help fulfill that vision. Here's what I want to say about those 2 churches. That of all of the churches I visited, those were the 2 churches the most alike. The one that had no screen on Sunday morning, and the one that had 7 screens across the front, and the fog machines and the lights going. They were the most alike because they were the 2 that had put the most critical thought into how digital technology was affecting their witness in the community. Many of the other churches used a variety of technologies, or didn't use a variety of technologies, but they hadn't thought about it to the extent that those 2 congregations, I believe, had. Both of those churches understand that digital technology changes how people think of themselves, how they think of their community, and how they think about God. They are responding in ways that are appropriate for their vision, and although they seem to be extreme opposites, I think they're quite alike. They both have a deep understanding of the ways that social life is changing because of the development of digital technology. They both use that understanding to fulfill their vision for ministry and witness, although they do so in quite different ways. Now, I want to look at some statistical results from my own research. During the past year and a half, I've conducted research in 20 congregations in the U.S. and Canada. A variety of denominations, 1,512 adults completed a questionnaire, and I've done focus groups and interviewed a number of clergy. And I just want to go through these, and I know, there are numbers over the screen, and oh dear, statistics, I hear what you're saying to me silently. But mainly, and I could show you many, many other slides, but mainly I want to show that if we are my age or older and think, I don't think this stuff's really that important, our perspective is quite different from those who are younger than we are. So let's just look at some of these. Digital technology has affected my own religious faith. Well, we'd say digital technology, how does that affect a person's faith? Well, exactly. If you're older than 75, 60% of people said it doesn't have any effect. But look at people 25 and younger. 94% of them say, yeah, it has some effect. And in fact, if you look at, on the scale of 1 to 10, again, it's 6.13 is the mean score. So people 25 and younger are saying, my faith is affected by digital technology. They know that. Technology has changed the way I think about myself, my personal identity, who I am, who I understand myself to be. Well, again, if you're older than 75, even if you're older than 65, most people say, no. But if you're 25 and younger, you're saying, yes, it has an effect. Again, the score isn't quite as high, but it's important. Technology has changed the way I think about other people. Again, the score is twice as high for those 25 and younger than it is for those who are older. 90% of people 25 and younger says it has at least some effect on how I think of other people. Well, we say digital technology, that hurts relationships. People aren't as close as they used to be. Well, that's exactly what people older than I am say. But not those who are 25 and younger. Again, it's sort of a neutral answer there, 4.53. But again, if you look at how many say it has no effect, less than a quarter of them say it's had no effect on whether or not I have a number of close friends. And this one we'd say, well, certainly this has no effect. Digital technology has changed the way that I think about God. Again, it's not high numbers. I wouldn't have expected that. But the numbers become higher as the age cohort gets younger. And how many say it's had no effect? Well, more than 2/3 of those 25 and younger say, I think it's had at least some effect on how I think about God. Facebook makes me feel closer to my friends. Again, some people would say, oh, this technology, there's no intimacy there. Well, 25 and younger, that's a pretty high number. Say, I feel closer to my friends because of Facebook. How important is it that the church has a Facebook page? And I thought this was sort of interesting. You'll see that actually the number goes down when you get to those 25 and younger, although the most common answer still goes up. So it's obviously some outliers in that first number, the 5.48. And I was sort of puzzled about this until I had the focus groups, which were mostly people 25 and younger. And as I talked to them about a Facebook page or web page, they would say, oh yes, it's really important. And then they'd say, but church web pages are an abomination. They're awful. I think that had an effect perhaps on the number for that group. So again, just to give you a sense that as the age cohort becomes younger, a sense that digital technology is having a greater effect on their understanding of themselves, their social relationships, and even how they understand and relate to God. Those numbers change. Young adults are more than 3 times more likely than seniors to think differently about themselves because of digital technology. All age groups except seniors believe that digital technology has positively affected friendships. Facebook has become an essential aspect of community in many churches, even among seniors. Seniors were not among the early adopters, but even during the course of my study, an increasing proportion of seniors recognized the need to enter the digital age. They wanted to see those pictures of their grandchildren. Implications, quickly, for church life. First, technology and social life. Church leaders make a huge mistake if we think that digital media is only about the projection of images and communication. It is about social life. It's about our understanding of who we are, especially for young adults who are forming their sense of self. Digital technology is unlike one-way media. It is more than a platform for communicating and getting information. It shapes our understanding of who we are socially and individually. And churches that don't understand that are not going to be effective in helping people to understand who they are in relation to God. Church leaders I spoke to, some of them talked about the financial cost of digital technology as an extra that removes money from other needs. And this was very clear. Young adults see the cost of digital technology as more important than building or property maintenance. Their perspective is that the church can survive without a building, but not without social connectedness. In terms of place, seniors are able to watch live stream services. Students and travelers can be part of their home church community. People talked about going on a mission trip and watching their church service every week while they're on another continent. People may belong to several congregations. That's sort of new. Keeping touch socially on Facebook and Twitter and participating in worship online. Baby boomers are becoming seniors, and most of them are unchurched. Our church is considering how to incorporate digital media and social media in their witness to seniors. The culture in some churches seems to suggest that thinking seniors need to hear the gospel is sort of a lack of respect for one's elders. We have a lot of seniors we need to reach who are outside of our church buildings. Digital technology is not just a new tool for the church, it is a new social reality. Churches that choose to ignore the social change brought about by digital technology, or churches that choose to oppose its use in the life of the church with no rationale regarding the church's mission, are not going to survive. Realizing how life is changing in our society, churches have choices about how we will incorporate technology so that we can be part of the dialogue and part of the social lives of younger members, and increasingly the lives of older members too. I want to close with a brief and probably quite irreverent quote from a young adult in a focus group. I asked the group, "What effect does digital technology have on worship at your church?" And she responded, "It doesn't suck anymore."
Thank you, Steve. We're going to take a few minutes now for some questions for Steve. But first, I'm going to make a brief announcement that I hope is not too late. Blue Nissan Sentra, Nova Scotia license plate EZJ579. Your lights have been on all this time, so you might want to go turn them off. Announcement done. So let's have some questions for Steve. And I would ask, there's a mic here and a microphone here. For your question, if you would come down and if you would put your mouth right up to the microphone, that would be helpful. And don't be afraid to line up. First come, first serve.
I guess I beat Jonathan. You mentioned one of the things like web pages and Facebook you mentioned about the comment from kind of the young adults is how bad churches do them. And I've had some reason in recent history to look at some web pages and Facebook pages for other purposes, and I understand some of that dynamic. But what is it that they're looking for, maybe content-wise, style-wise, elements that they're not finding or they're finding so poorly done? Like, what are some of the key ingredients?
Okay, let me answer in two ways. In terms of the key ingredients, I think they want to know who the church is. So they want to know people. I'm thinking, again, of focus groups. Simple things like they said, we want to see pictures of what goes on inside the building. Before they go in the door, they want to see what's going on in there. Particularly for people that maybe are coming to church for the first time is a big step. And I'm probably thinking particularly of people in that church that I said is up to 2,300, because most of their people were secular young. I mean, they were unchurched people before they started coming. And they were saying that was what attracted them to this church. They could find out lots of things about the church before they actually came in the door the first week. I think they want to know, are they going to be safe? Are their kids going to be safe? Those types of things. To go back to what you said at the beginning, here's what I would say that's been interesting to me. Some of the really bad websites that I have looked at, and I've gone through a lot of websites in doing this. When I went to the churches and talked to people, they would tell me who it was that had designed the website. Usually they were well beyond my years in age. And I think there was a sense of, well, it has to be someone we can trust to do this. What was funny in some cases, I think one church especially was, they had this really ugly, horrible website up, It really was. But what happened was then some of the young adults had started a church Facebook page on their own, and the older people in the church didn't even know it was there. That was really quite a bit better. So I think sometimes we need to just go to young adults and say, would you please do this for us? We trust you that you know how to do this better than we do. I saw this in some funny ways too, and I think I've said this maybe at Talk Rock or somewhere, or maybe at lunch. I went to churches to do surveys and then usually have a focus group right after. And as I would be asking people questions in the focus group about their church, I would hear people say, well, I really don't know because I don't come here. And I'm looking at them and I'm saying, well, you're here in the focus group. They said, oh, well, I heard that you were going to be here doing a survey on technology and doing a focus group. And I said, I want to be here for that. Which struck me again that here are these people who have a real interest in terms of how to make technology work in a church, and the church is really saying, we're not interested. So I think there are ways in which we need to get younger people involved in doing some of these things. They would be less abominable, probably. And they would know what people are looking for, too.
Part of technology is it has created an environment where we are accessible 24/7.
Yes.
And part of my question is, how do we teach our people to Sabbath technology? Not that technology is what it is, but how do we teach Sabbath in regards? And secondly is relationally, because we live in 24/7, sometimes we'll get a response from maybe a church member or something, and people will respond back, immediately, which may be positive or negative. How do we teach, a good approach with that? So it's kind of Sabbath and proper element to response.
It's not easy. That's the first thing I will say. I think it's important for church leaders to model that. And again, it's not easy. So to begin with church leaders, I think there are ways in which church leaders can say to their congregation, we realize that everyone needs some time with their family, with themselves, time to read, time to think. And so here is what we do in our home. I've really appreciated, the pastor of my church very candidly talking about, they put their cell phones in a basket at a certain time in the day, that, nobody's answering cell phones. I think that's a great modeling to do. Now, having said that, one of the issues for people in our churches may be that they have an employer who is not impressed if the cell phone's in a basket somewhere. And I think that's again, one of the challenges that, some people are employed by people who really are expecting them to be accessible 24/7. I don't have an easy answer for that. I think we need to encourage them to dialogue with their employer and maybe with other workers and find ways. But I think at least we need to be aware that that is a huge issue in their lives. And a different issue happens, and this I heard in focus groups, a different issue happens with young people in terms of texting. And that is, if you send a text to someone and you don't, or if you receive a text from someone and you do not reply within the stated, appropriate limit of time, many very mean things can begin to be said about you online. And so there are some things that actually I heard that were helpful. For example, in focus groups I was told it was very helpful if the church made rules during the worship. Now, again, I'm not big on rules at church. But they said it's helpful for teenagers if they can tell their friends, oh, and by the way, I'm going to be at church and we are not allowed to respond to text during that time. Whether the rule is that stringent or not, it helps them to at least be able to have that time where they don't feel that pressure to respond. But again, I think we need to be aware of that too. Our young adults, our teenagers in our churches may feel tremendous pressure that we did not feel when we were their age in terms of this instant response. If they don't respond instantly, they're insulting the other person. I think we need to talk with them and help them to find a strategy to deal with that. And it's probably different for people, for different people. But so, I think modeling is really important from church leaders and telling people what strategy you're using, because that may resonate with them and help them to be able to come up with a strategy. May be different, but it may at least help them to do that. And I think we need to help people to know that we do understand some of the constraints that they're under because of their work or because of their friends.
Another question.
You said that one of the things was there was still quite a large contingent of people that said their view of God was affected by technology.
Yeah.
And which would be, I read a book called The Hidden Power of Electronic Culture by Shane Hipps, and he talked about the Marshall McLuhan comment, the medium being the message.
Right.
And so I'm wondering where we're seeing that being the case, that there is a sense of my view of God is affected by technology. What are some of the things that they're saying about what that view looks like? Positive, negative, things that they infer about God's character based on these experiences of technology? Because I think we need to ask that question. As these two church examples you gave us,
right.
We're asking
right.
the question, how does this influence who we're presenting Jesus to be?
Right. And I guess what I'll say, first of all, is one of the problems with my research is that it is research of people who are in churches. Very strongly, what I received from young adults was a sense of their worship being enhanced by the use of digital technology. So I got very positive responses. People said, it was hard for them to conceive of a worship experience apart from some use of that technology. So they saw it, and maybe that's a little too strong, but they saw it as enhancing their worship in a number of ways. And more than one church where they mentioned the arts specifically, they said, how could you do these things? I saw in some churches some of the artistic things that they had done with technology, and I will honestly say, I found it tremendously moving just to watch. One of my classes here at Acadia, I can give an example. I showed in the class one church where they had, on Easter Sunday, the focus was on adoption. They had done a series on doctrine, and they were finishing on Easter Sunday with a sense that because of the cross and the resurrection, this had led to, I'm not expressing this very well theologically, but it led to us becoming children of God through what Christ had done. And so the entire service was built around this theme of adoption. And they went to families in their congregation who had adopted children, and they videoed them. And they had a staff member, actually, who had been adopted as a child. They interviewed her talking about what she had gone through, the experience that she remembered when she was a small child of waiting to be adopted and finally being in a family. And then they interviewed the father who had adopted her. And all of this was done in-house. These were people in their congregation. So they did that storyline. They showed a number of families with their adopted children. And then the pastor preached a sermon on adoption that followed that. And it was like, how does anybody even deal with all of the thoughts, emotions, new understandings of what it means? And I'm preaching here, aren't I? So I guess I would say, because I was asking people in churches, what I was hearing was from people where churches were using technology quite a bit, and they were telling me how much it enhanced their worship. What I wonder is how it's affecting the unchurched. And I suspect it's not quite the same, but I think it's still affecting them and their understanding of God quite profoundly.
Maybe one more question. While you're thinking about it, let's just very quickly, how many of you have smartphones? How many of you text? Okay.
I should be writing this down for my...
It's interesting for the demographic how many of us have smartphones. Another question.
I'm not entirely sure the extent of your research, but if you could speak into maybe what you think the effects of mobile digital technology has on society as a whole and how that's coming into a church, whether or not we are able to fully be present when that is present as well.
I mean, I think you've phrased it well. Let me just say there's really been a good amount of writing on the whole always-on phenomena. And I just would encourage you to read some of that. There are a number of authors. I mean, if you just Google it, always on, I'm sure you'll get some articles and some books that will come up. I think that's one of the biggest issues with having the device with you all the time. You are always accessible, and in ways that the people know you're always accessible. I mean, the telephone, they never really knew if you were in the room or not, you know? They know that the cell phone's in your pocket, that you have it. And that I think, and I think that as the age cohort gets younger, puts more pressure. So I think for me, I don't feel that much pressure, honestly, when the cell phone rings. But I suspect the people who are, say, 20, in many cases, feel a tremendous amount of pressure, not only because they feel they need to answer, but because it rings continually. Like, have you been with somebody who's 20? Try to have a conversation. Oh, just a minute, you know, in just a minute, in just a minute. Because it's ring, or it's text. I mean, they have to answer a text, like right then, while they're, you know, talking to you, sort of, you know, but they're texting. It's just so continual. And it's not as if it's really important stuff. I mean, it's pretty trivial in many cases. But once again, if they don't respond right away, they sort of fear the consequences. How can we pastorally and probably prophetically begin to give guidance to help people, to help those younger people think through what's happening in their lives so that they can make choices? I think in many cases, they simply have not made choices because maybe they don't even think the choices are possible. So can we help them at least to think through what choices they need to make or what they can make with regard to that always-on phenomenon?
Well, let's begin this by expressing our thanks to Steve for the stimulating lecture tonight.